Hi again. In this video, we're going to cover what columns we have and what they mean and basically how you can set them. So let's jump right in. First one we have is a record ID. That is not something that you as a user set, but something is automatically created when you create new rows and new lines. So yeah, we use this a lot internal in our tools to figure out what is what. So you don't really need to worry about it. Just be aware that this is something that needs to be there. We do have another one that's called Fatshark ID and Fatshark ID auto-generated. Now, the auto-generated one is not used for more than a show that this is how this line should be named, and how this line is named is basically by lock underscore, which is our mandatory prefix. There's also character, there is the bank name, and there's the version. And at the end, if there is a specific platform, you will also have a specific platform ending. So for example, if I change this platform ending, you will see that this should then be underscore XPS. So this is what this line should be called. And the reason why we are not using this directly is simply because when we migrated from our old data, there was a lot of stuff that were not named like this. And because we have so much data out already, there's just no time to convert them all into what they are. Going forward, we will most likely be using this auto-generated. And I can recommend for everyone that this is probably the names that you should use. So figure out that you can copy this into here is a good idea. So Fatshark ID, it's the one that we are actually using. And this name is super important because that is what is being used in the game to look up a certain string. So this is the actual ID used in game. So this needs to stay the same basically forever. So make sure you get it right. Now, the next field we have is called production batch. Now, the reason we have such a field is that we send things to external partners, and it's just a good thing to have. So you can order and filter on a specific batch when you're working with a specific batch of things, especially when sent to external partners. So it's remember to fill this in if you have a batch that you want to work with. Platform as in short, which platform we are sending the string to. Most strings will be for all platforms, but there might be very specific things, like for example, Xbox controllers or whatnot versus PlayStation controllers that needs press this button instead of this button. So that could be good to separate those two out. Priority kind of speaks for itself. How important is this to do now? We have a planned release, which is basically when this specific line is needed. Now this, you could see there's a P here, and that means that these options comes from a different grid. So you can see if it as all of these options actually comes from somewhere else, and that just makes it easier for us to add release names, etc. You will find more fields like this that has a P, and that just means that we're fetching these options from a different place, so it can be shared amongst a bunch of different grids. We have two main columns. One is development language, which is basically where all our development or people that want to add new strings, they add this. We have the master. This is what all the other languages will be looking at, and it's going to be translated. So this is what our writers are using. So they would look at the dev string and they would write up something reasonable. We have context, And context is, as it sounds, like basically a small description of what this and where this thing is done. So like sign text, or if it's a specific person that says something to someone, yeah, basically where it happens. So people who is translating and writing the lines have some sort of context. Speaking to is basically just a single person or multiple persons. This is so the translators can get the correct state of the words, basically, for when you're speaking to singular multiple persons, which is not obvious unless you have set it. Part of our workflow is also to have everything approved by different roles. So we have a narrative state, which is basically set to approved or not approved. You could see that also needs reapproval, etc. And we have notes for these people. So narratives go in and they would look at this and go, is this approved from a narrative state? Yes, no, this needs reapproval, etc. And good thing about this is when any of these are set, the same with the legal state and legal notes, is that people who's written notes or rather written the text, like writers, translators, etc., they will be pinged when something is not approved, and they will see that in their to-do view. So legal states the same thing, another approval step. We do have a sneaky checkbox, which is called do not translate, for very specific things that only needs English language. There are a few of those. So if for some reason you don't need this string localized, then check this box. Then we have a bunch of languages that currently for the test strings have not been added. But you see we have a bunch of them. Now we come to a part where mainly strings that has to do with sound, like dialogues, etc. Because these are basically dialogue, a lot of dialogue options that is needed for that. But I will go through them anyway, and if you're only working with like UI strings, you can disregard this part. But bank name is basically the where the sound should load from. Nothing really more to say about that. We have character name and we have character gender. So basically, if you change the character name here, it will automatically give you what kind of gender it is. It's very good for translation as well. As you can see, this is also P, which means that these characters come from a different grid, and you will have access to this grid as well. So if you want to get more information about Sergeant A, you can go in there and see, like, yeah, get a bit more bio about this character. Variation is, simply put, if you have the same line but multiple variations of it, like 10 different ways for Sergeant A to say hello, which is, so you have variation 1, 0, and variation 1 for the exact same thing. It's just a different variation of it. We do have something called Dialog Group, and Dialog Group is, think of it as a specific dialogue or a script. Like these 3 people are talking, and like we can call it shopkeep 1 conversation, for example. And together with that, we have the dialogue order, which basically says which line should come first in which order under this shopkeep conversation. So person A would have a dialogue order 1, person 2 would have dialogue order 1, and 2, 3, 4, etc. So just a good thing to know. So when you're writing in a dialogue, that you get a good flow of it and easy to filter on. We have category, which is something that we use internally. There are specific categories for specific things. Like we have something called missions briefings, and there are exits and intros, and yeah, different things. Missions, you could also see here that this is a P, which means it comes from a different grid, but basically which mission is this contained to. And that's good for when figuring out gameplay and also like when you're setting stuff up. We have something else called line sequence number. This has been previously used for when doing recordings to know basically what the recording studio is working with and in which order the specific batch is doing things. This is very specific to our workflow and may not suit everyone. Voice actor guidelines. These are for our recording studios that also will use Gridley. So basically, it is what it is. Voice actor guidelines. We also have something called Loudness, which may find a better word for it, but it's a description of how the sound should sound. So if you have a helmet talking through a radio, if you're running, are super exhausted, or if you're like halfway in a mud pit trying to crawl up, things like that will affect the loudness and the panicness and yeah, everything around kind of the recording of this certain thing. Now we have these kind of states again. Same thing as for the legal and narrative states. We have a bunch of recording states. And the idea here is that when a recording studio is done with something and uploads it, they will set this to needs review, and it will go back to the reviewers, and they will see that in their to-do, and then they can simply review it, set this to approved or not. And for the recording studio, they will also in their to-do see if things have been approved or not approved. And yeah, it's just an easier feedback loop. Recorder notes is from the studio, like we couldn't record this line this way, so we recorded it this way, for example. So there's basically a new text that needs to be altered by the writer. We also have a field for recording feedback, which is basically when a reviewer have looked at or listened to a sound and like not approved it, and we need some feedback. So this will also show up in the recorder studio. We have some file fields. So this is for uploading your dev sound. For example, text to speech, or you just needed something in game when you added this line to some sound to make sense. This field is for the recorded sound studio or the recording sound studio, and where they will upload their sounds. Now, I will mention there are a bunch of tools for doing this that I will explain in different videos, but this is only for this is where you're going to upload it, and this is where the tool will upload it as well. So we do have a custom importer for this that I will show you in a different video. But it is perfectly fine to add it in here as well. Also worth noting, when you have sounds in here, you can play them directly in Gridley. This is a sneaky one. Custom output file is basically leave this empty unless you have been specifically told to put something here. This is only used for stripping at the moment. So we split out our exported sounds, the game exported sounds, into several files if something should be able to be stripped. For example, we're working on a product right now and we don't want to release it on the next release because it's not ready yet. Then all the strings that are part of this should be in its own file so we can strip it. This is also very custom to our workflow. And at the very end, we simply have a path. Again, these are what you could see in here. You could also change the path from here, but and you can obviously change it from this as well. But it's good to know that this you could see it easily, and this is a good way of sorting and filtering on them if you don't want to use the path view. Last modified by, this would be me, and time. And I know, there is a lot of columns, a lot of fields. There will be documentation for this, so don't worry about it. You can read up on all of it in peace and quiet, but at least you have an overview of what exists, and most of you will not see this ever. It will be a subset of all of this, and some of the fields will also be locked, and so don't worry, you will not be able to destroy stuff for other people. So yeah. Okay, I think that's it for this video, and thank you for your time, and I will see you in the next video.